Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Leadership Winston-Salem's Leaders and Lunch. We have an exciting panel that will be joining us today for our Q&A. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a few announcements on our Leadership Winston-Salem calendar. On behalf of the staff and the board of directors, we'd like to wish you a happy holiday season. Upcoming in January, we do have our community conversation scheduled for January the 12th. We will be having a discussion on mental health. So mark your calendars, more details to come. In February, we have our Leadership Winston-Salem book club scheduled for February the 9th. We will be reading Phoebe Zerwick's book, Beyond Innocence, The Life Sentence of Daryl Hunt. If you want more information about that, you're welcome to reach out to me at kp@leadershipwinstonsalem.org. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Coulombe. Jennifer is a Leadership Winston-Salem Action Learning Coach and also serves on our Alumni Council. Jennifer?
Thank you, Catherine, and welcome everyone. We're so excited to have everyone here today. Really excited to hear what our panelists have to say, and it's my pleasure to have coordinated this event along with my partner in crime, Jeff Smith, many of you know as Smitty. I'm just going to do a quick introduction for him, and then we will get started as he'll introduce the panelists and then moderate today's discussion. So all of you hopefully are familiar with Smitty's notes that's reaching over 15,000 people in and around the Winston-Salem community. Jeff has been a staple in the community on keeping us all connected and aware of what's going on. It's so important. He's got great ties to Leadership Winston-Salem, of course, being part of the Alumni Council, and of course, a number of other volunteer opportunities, including Leadership Winston-Salem, City of Winston-Salem Citizens Police Academy, and also the City of Winston-Salem City's Fire Academy. There are a number of other things, but Jeff, I think I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to you, and welcome everyone. Thank you.
All right, Jennifer, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. Welcome to the Lunch and Learn series, Leadership Winston-Salem has. Today we're going to focus on government and public safety. And we have our esteemed panelists with us today. And if the panelists can unmute themselves and say hello shortly after I introduce them. The first person is Chantel Robinson. She is Deputy Forsyth County Manager who oversees social services, human resources, community and economic development, behavioral health, court diversion programs, family justice, and MAP Forsyth. Chantel, you have a lot of responsibilities, so say hello.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm happy to be here.
All right. We have Assistant Chief William Penn. Chief Penn began his tenure at the police department in 1997. He's been promoted to captain in 2005, sergeant 2009, lieutenant in 2014, and captain in 2017. Assistant Penn has served in the patrol division, foot patrol, vice and narcotics, crime prevention, recruiting unit, and has been a division District 1 commander. So Chief Penn, if you could say hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. And then we have our Fire Chief William Trey Mayo. Chief Mayo joined us in 2015 from Rocky Mount. He was a fire chief there. He's also has an associate degree in fire protection and technology, and also a master's degree in public administration from North Carolina State University. And he's also a member of the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Office program, and he's also a third degree fireman. So, Chief Mayo, you can say hello.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Happy holidays to everybody.
And then finally, we have Jay Walsh. Jay serves as Dean of the Public Safety Technologies with Forsyth Tech Community College. He has had a illustrious public safety career as a volunteer and also as a teacher. He retired from the Winston-Salem Fire Department as a division fire chief. So, Jay, if you could say hello, we really appreciate it.
Hello, happy to be here. Thank you for having me on the panel.
So the first question that we have actually is related to what we're facing as a top challenge for government and public safety. What is the biggest challenge facing your sector of local government today, both actually and chronologically. So we'll start with Chief Penn.
Yeah, so I'd be remiss not to say it's going to be staffing, in the sense of who we have available to do the day-to-day job, as well as recruiting. The numbers aren't coming in like they used to. I'll point out retention in the sense that we just have a ton of people retiring or choosing to get out of the law enforcement field. So those are the ones that come to mind immediately, as well as increased violence. Now, chronically, what I would tell you is that if you asked any officer 20 years ago, what's a chronic problem, they would say juveniles. So I'm gonna say juveniles, but juveniles in the sense that our juveniles are now involved in activity that utilizes guns. So it's the gun violence along with our juveniles is a chronic problem that we consistently have for decades now.
Now, as far as hiring, Chief Penn, you have how many sworn officers in Winston-Salem that you're allotted for, and how many do you actually have?
So right now we're allotted 530 sworn officers, and we're about 100 short of that.
So staffing is really an issue.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Jay Walsh, could you tell us a little bit about some of the biggest challenges you've been facing in your career in local government today?
Well, I'll kind of echo what Chief Penn said. So, hiring and retaining talent has been difficult. Here at the community college, it's not separate from all the other entities that's represented here, when it comes to that piece, and especially hiring talent to teach within public safety, because public safety, police department, EMS, fire, they're critically short. And when you have those agencies that are critically short, trying to get those instructors on board to be able to teach when they're needed in the field creates a challenge in itself. And, and that is acutely, and it's happened obviously because of COVID, and it's chronic just from the long-term piece where, as Chief Penn talked about, just those amount of officers that are leaving the field. At the same time they leave the field, a lot of times they do not want to come teach because they are completely done with public safety for whatever reason. Their life has changed in that. So for us, it's hiring and retaining that talent. And we want to make sure that talent is the best talent, because it's a full circle piece. Because at the same time, we are the agency that in turn trains the new workforce coming into each one of our disciplines within public safety. So that is a kind of a circular piece.
So Jay, have you had an issue related to people who have left the agency but actually have moved on to another department within public safety, like gone to another county and worked as a paramedic?
So we have, and that is a chronic problem we're having now with the paramedic shortage, that there are other areas that paramedics were not necessarily used for in the past. Hospitals, primary care, a lot of those areas, including nursing homes or assisted living, are employing paramedics. Challenge there is that drains our paramedic pool that serves Forsyth and Stokes County, are two areas that we serve. So yes, there are areas and people that are in those fields that are leaving to go to other fields, still within their discipline, but outside of the public safety realm.
Thank you. Chief Mayor.
Yeah, so I'm not to just repeat what others have said, but recruiting is a challenge for us too, particularly a diverse set of getting a diverse set of applicants who want to make the fire service a career. We're increasingly seeing we've turned from having folks coming to the fire service who intend to spend 30 years to people who are coming into the fire service and just view it as a job. They do it for 4 or 5 years and then they go do something else. We are struggling with maintaining and replacing an aging apparatus fleet. We're seeing delivery times now of 2 years from the time you order a fire truck until you actually get it. We're seeing increased rates of cancer among firefighters, which has training, equipment, process, and healthcare implications. And then something that, just shows up as kind of that last item on the news once a month, and that is dealing with the perfluoroalkyls and polyfluoroalkyl substances that are in firefighting foam, concentrate, and turnout gear. And these are the PFOAs and PFASs, those forever chemicals that have been in the news, some that show up in various places in drinking water supplies. But what those forever chemicals provide for firefighters is a fire control product that we have relied on for decades, particularly controlling flammable liquid fires, and it shows up in our turnout gear as a water repellent. And we're going to have to, we're no longer going to be able to use those chemicals. And right now, there's not a real good alternative.
Right. So what you're facing too is just not only a shortage of people who are actually joining the fire service, but the type of chemicals that you've used in the past that you may not be able to use going forward. Correct?
That's accurate.
Yeah. Chantel, could you give us your thoughts on the biggest challenges you are facing in local government?
Sure. So I kind of categorized it as 3 items. Definitely the labor market challenges for all the same reasons everyone has said. We are feeling that here in the county as well, almost across the board. Now, some areas are worse than others, such as nurses, social workers, detention officers. But across the board, we are feeling it. And so we're, constantly trying to figure out ways to be flexible, creative, while also meeting our statutory obligations, because as a county entity, we are legally required to do lots of various things. Other areas I would say that's been a challenge is really addressing the mental health and opioid crisis in our community. And so we're really working hard to partner with various entities to do that. And then, like Assistant Chief Penn said, we're also working to really try to reduce crime in our community as well.
Right. Oh, also I want to tell the folks who are in the audience that you're more than welcome to ask any questions. We have a Q&A probably toward the last 15 or 10 or 15 minutes before the Lunch and Learn ends. So please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A chat box. So what innovative solutions are on the horizon to address these challenges that you're having? Chief Penn?
Yeah, before I jump into the technology, one of the innovative solutions that we're working hard at is just collaboration with agencies that we've never worked with before. We have to recognize that the problems facing law enforcement can't be solved by a gun and a badge alone. So that's a very important innovative solution, is just working with others. We have the shot spotter technology that we've talked about in the community, as far as acoustic system that lets us know when gunshots are fired. We realize that about 80% of the time a firearm is shot in our city, that folks aren't calling the police. This technology allows us to know when those shots are being fired, so we can get out there, render aid if needed, and effectively conduct that investigation. We have a drone program, so we're trying to get on board with that. That's futuristic, but at the same time, that's present day. That technology is being used for shopping. So it would make sense that law enforcement would use that in fighting crime. Artificial intelligence cameras, LPRs. Again, I'm saying innovative like it's new, but that's technology that's being used in phones and downtown parking all across the city. So it's not that new. I also want to point out LexisNexis. We're trying to afford our citizens the opportunity to report minor crimes from their homes so that they don't have to wait on a law enforcement agent to get there. And this is for the minor crimes that are taking place in the community. And we're so proud of our Real-Time Crime Center, which is a platform that utilizes the cameras within the city so that we can see what's going on before we get there, and it helps us solve crimes. Again, not totally new. The infrastructure has already been there in the community, but the police department is using innovative methods to help with reducing crime.
Right. Chief Mayor.
Yeah, as it relates to recruiting and hiring, the fire service has historically put about 90% of its resources or more into emergency response. So, code enforcement and public education, risk reduction, and other non-emergency activities that fire departments should be doing have always starved for resources. And for most of us, there's no excess capacity for emergency response resources to take on these other critical tasks. And we've taken steps internally, for example, creating career development opportunities for minorities and assembling majority-minority interview panels and developing validated testing instruments and those sorts of things. But for us to be able to better recruit fire service minorities and to recruit in general, there has to be an allocation of resources and positions for marketing and recruiting and relationship building. I was recently reading some info from Lexipol, and it was clear that with Gen Z supplying most new workers and subsequent to the Great Resignation, the fire service can no longer count on being overrun with applicants like we were 20 years ago. We're going to have to go out and find potential employees and develop relationships before they apply. Related to supply chain issues and fire apparatus, receiving fire apparatus and being able to buy parts, I don't see that getting any better until those supply chain issues are resolved. And I'm not sure what that looks like. The U.S. has very limited capacity for fire truck manufacturing, and there's zero economy of scale in that industry. Related to cancer, one of the other things I mentioned, we've embraced most of the solutions to cancer among firefighters. We limit exposure to potentially carcinogenic products of combustion. We minimize a firefighter's time in turnout gear. We cool and clean that gear as soon as possible to reduce off-gassing. What we haven't done a good job with is incentivizing better diets and more exercise among firefighters as general cancer prevention measures. And then finally, in regard to those forever chemicals, those PFAS and PFOSs, PFOAs, there's a major effort underway to develop alternatives to those fluorinated firefighting foams. But as I mentioned earlier, those fluorinated ingredients, that's the key to making those products work and do what they do. And whatever that non-fluorinated alternative looks like, its integration into the firefighter's toolbox is going to require significant training and investment in equipment.
One question, Chief. So has health and wellness been something that y'all have kind of focused on in the last 3 years in the fire service?
The fire service has talked about it for a lot of years, but putting measures in place to really hold firefighters accountable for diet and exercise is more challenging, particularly when you're working with ADA implications for our firefighting friends in the Northeast and Upper Midwest and on the West Coast, who are heavily unionized fire departments. It's more easily said than done.
All right, Chantel.
So first and foremost, what I will say is, our elected officials, our county commissioners, they recognize the need that we have to do things differently, business differently, and they are supporting us with those things. So on the kind of employment side, I was the county's previous human resources director. And I will tell you, I've told the current human resources director, everything I trained y'all to do, please don't do it because it doesn't work anymore. We are in a different place and we have to do things differently. We're working with the community colleges as an example to really help boost our pipeline. We're realizing that we're having to create our employees. So EMT, for example, we're working with Forsyth Tech, having individuals go through their EMT program. We're paying them to go through the program. We're allowing them to go from EMT to paramedic. We're going to have to create and train people differently than we've ever had to do. Previously, we had tons of applicants all the time. We could pick and choose and those types of things. Now we have to move quickly and kind of think outside the box and how to really make sure we have the resources that we need to serve the community. On the mental health and opioid side, we are actually working with the hospitals and behavioral health providers, our team, as well as the state. We're creating a one-stop shop model for the community on Highland Avenue. Right now, there's a behavioral health urgent care and outpatient services for mental health and substance use. And there's also a primary care clinic there that's run by Atrium and Novant. We're adding a facility-based crisis center because we know a lot of individuals with mental health and substance use goes to the emergency room, which is typically not the right place that they need to go. So we're trying to build a continuum of care in this facility. We're renovating it so that it can provide all the services that someone needs. Because when you are in a crisis, the last thing you want to do is to have to constantly go around the community to find the services that you need. And so we're trying to build that up in that place, and we're in the design phase of that, and we're excited about that. The county is also receiving opioid settlement funds in the amount of almost $20 million over the next 18 years. And so we're also working really hard to build strategies on how we can best address the opioid crisis in our community. And then finally, in terms of reducing crime, we have a partnership with the city of Winston-Salem, and we're starting the Cure Violence program. Assistant Chief Penn is also part of the steering committee for that, and many others. But we're trying to address gun gang violence in a different way. It's from a public health perspective. It's a public health model, and it would provide individuals who previously possibly was a gangbanger that changed their life, and you're putting them boots on the ground in the community that they live in to serve as what we call violence interrupters and outreach workers. And so it's an evidence-based model stemmed out of Chicago that various communities around the country have. And so we're bringing this pilot program here because we know we need a lot of tools in our toolbox to address the various situations. And so that's something on the horizon that we hope to get up and running probably next month, February at the latest.
Right, good deal. Jay, what is your thought on innovative solutions on the horizon?
So we've done several innovative things, and Chantel alluded to one of those. For us at Forsyth Tech, we're heavily committed to make sure all of our community partners has the workforce and can retain the workforce. That is something that the college president, Dr. Spriggs, and administration has heavily allowed us to do in the public safety area is to innovate, to do those things. As Chantel alluded to, we partnered with Forsyth County Emergency Services to run that first EMT Academy, which is something we've not really done, but that was a true partnership between Forsyth County and us to get those pieces together and try to create a workforce that, as she alluded to, that typically in the past you wouldn't have to do. You would have lots and lots of people apply. From a retention standpoint, we also reached out to our community partners to figure out where are our gaps. In the public safety realm, why are people leaving? What are the gaps? Where are not feeling successful? So we also partnered with the Winston-Salem Fire Department, and we created a leadership series. And this is an 8-week series of classes that is primarily about hoping those folks that are going up through the promotional process to give them skills that they wouldn't necessarily get anywhere. And these are classes that are taught from professionals in that area. So they are not necessarily coming out of the public safety field. These are leadership experts that are teaching these classes to be able to give that basis of leadership knowledge. Because we know in the retention, when we spoke to everybody and through several meetings, that some employees were leaving because they just didn't feel that they were supported. And that support sometimes comes from giving them the proper education that they need to be able to manage employees and do those types of things. Forsyth Tech, obviously is the catalyst for that. And we did our first one with Winston-Salem Fire Department this past spring. We have another one coming up next spring, and it's actually open to all agencies. And we do have some other agencies that come in, but the first partnership was with Winston Fire. And that's the piece from an innovative side for us is collaboration. You know, it is reaching out to all of our community partners and asking them, what do you need? I mean, what we want your employees to be happy and successful through their career. And as an educational facility for SciTech, we have the tools to do that.
So is career development and continuing education something new related to the paramedic field?
It's not necessarily new. We're just revamping it because the paramedic field, a law enforcement officer, firefighter, all of those careers have changed over the years. They become more technical. They become a lot more involved. So the continuing education that we would do for any of the fields 30 years ago looks completely different than we do now, just because technology has caught up. There's a lot of things in there. So that's the piece that for SciTech is really trying to work with everybody to make sure that that continuing education, that career development is what they need.
Great. On the horizon, what is your biggest concern? And Jay, I will start with you. What's the biggest concern that you have related to the paramedic field?
Well, I will say the biggest challenge really out there, and I'll kind of just step it back from more of an educational piece versus just straight the paramedic side, is there's a common theme, there's a narrative out there, and we've all seen it, we've seen headlines that, you know, education is not worth it. But at the same time, we also get the same narrative that our folks, you know, and I say across the state and the country are not getting the right education. You know, we kind of hear those competing narratives, so to speak. So for us, you know, that challenge is to change that narrative to make sure that everybody understands that education is important. And why is that important necessarily in the public safety field or in Forsyth County and Stokes County, but primarily as we're talking here in Forsyth County, is we want to be competitive. As Forsyth Tech, we want to make sure that each one of these agencies, Forsyth County as a whole, all of our partners are competitive with Guilford County. They're competitive with Wake County, that we do not have people leaving the workforce here and moving to other counties. So our goal is to change the narrative that higher education is worth it. We need all of our local leaders to help us with that, to make sure that they know that gaining an education, getting that piece to move forward in the workforce is to ensure that we are competitive. The areas here are competitive because we do not want our workforce leaving.
Great. Chantel, what are your thoughts?
So, you know, just kind of what's on the horizon I'm most concerned about. It actually has nothing to do with what we just talked about, because I am concerned about all of those things. But something different is about 40% of houses sold right now are being bought by investors. I think that's an interesting fact because that is significantly shifting the housing market. It's decreasing the supply of single family homes for individuals. And these are hodgepodge. It's investors buying it in developments. It may be one house here or a different house somewhere else. And we know that home ownership is one of the biggest drivers of intergenerational wealth. And so I think that that is something that we need to be aware of, mindful of, and something that has been somewhat recently put on our radar here at the county on like, how do we address that? What does that look like? So I don't have any answers, but I am concerned about what the impact of that may be.
Thank you. Chief Bear.
Yes, sir. Thank you. What I'm most concerned about is really not on the horizon. It's 50 years behind us. We just didn't take any meaningful action when it did come over the horizon. And that's a healthy fear of fire and understanding what level of service we should expect from America's fire service. The last time the nation collectively showed any concern about the effects of fire was during the Nixon administration when the report America Burning was commissioned. And for the decade that ended in 2019, the number of fires in America was down about 3%. And that's been a trend that's been going on for years. But the number of Americans who died in those fires was up 25%. And that should make everybody's eyebrows go up. If Americans feared fire, like the news media and Hollywood have conditioned them to fear crime, the American voter and taxpayer would demand that fire departments be adequately staffed, trained, and equipped. They would demand built-in fire protection. They would demand programs to address substandard housing. They would demand school curriculums focused on risk reduction. But because that fear of fire is essentially non-existent, the only entities driving the message about the dangers of fire are fire departments. And as I said earlier, we put all of our eggs in the response basket, not in the education basket. So that message that we're sending just doesn't have much oomph. And we have to stop thinking about fire as the tragedy that happens to somebody across town or in a neighboring city.
Good thoughts. Appreciate it. Chief Fenn.
It's going to be violent crime. The idea that the police alone can arrest and go out here and grab people off the street, and that's going to solve the violent crime problem is a misnomer. The fact is that we all can name at the top of our head what the social drivers are for crime in our communities, and yet we still find ourselves pointing fingers at who's not doing the right thing. It's so much more nuanced than we give it credit for. And while this is going on, while we're pointing fingers at who's to blame for the violent crime, we're finding that there are more and more guns out on the street. Past couple of years, we have seized more guns than we have ever seized before. 1,000 guns per year now. And yet and still, we're having shootings, several a night. So we're blessed that we have Atrium that's saving a lot of lives, but that's not from lack of effort, but we continuously have the violent crime in our communities. And it's going to be a nuanced approach. It has to be.
All right. Thank you, Chief Penn. The next question is, what is the biggest misconception that you would like to clear up about local government and public safety? Chantel, I'm going to start this one with you.
I think just in general, most people do not understand the difference between city, county, state, school system. I mean, they just do not understand. I also think sometimes people think government is just like, I don't know, this fictitious character, but government are real people. It's you, it's me, like we're all in this together. Sometimes I just want to walk people around and say, this is your government. These are the people, they're just like you, working really hard behind the scenes to make a difference in the community. The other very nuanced, I would say, about county government specifically is that people think the county is responsible for teacher pay. We are not responsible for teacher pay. We get, picketed about teacher pay. We're not responsible for teacher pay. Now, our county commissioners did put a sales tax referendum on a ballot to try to help with teacher pay supplements, and the voters voted on that. And so that does provide additional pay for teachers and supplements, but ultimately we're responsible for providing public school facilities. And our elected officials certainly is very supportive of teachers and doing what they can within their means, but we have statutory obligations that we have to meet. And so one of the misconceptions is that we're responsible for their pay, and we're not. So I'll leave it with that.
One of the things that I've learned over the years is that people get mixed up too about who's responsible for what. And I think I've learned over the years too is that it's your responsibility to step up and say, hey, no, they're not responsible for this issue, but they're responsible for this. So that is correct. Chief Mayor, what is your biggest misconception that people have about the fire service?
So I'll tell you that when you see firefighters buying groceries, they are not spending public dollars. The firefighters are paying for those groceries out of their pockets. So whether they're buying oodles of noodles or whether they're buying beef fillets, they're paying for them. And if I had a dollar for every time I've been asked that over my career, I could have retired years ago.
All right, Jay, what's the biggest misconception people have about the paramedic service?
Well, I would say really from an education standpoint, one of the biggest misconceptions that community colleges or higher education facilities in general are about chasing students. That it's about trying to collect as many students as possible from a funding standpoint. And that is a huge misconception. We are much more concerned about, the actual success of the student. We do a lot of data tracking on what the success is. As we see a student comes through, we're not just there to try to pull as many students in as we possibly can, if we're not going to put the tools into place to make sure that they're successful. So we spend a lot of our time in our strategic plan, Vision 2025, outlines a lot of things. And there's really nothing in that entire strategic plan, that misconception that it says, run out and try to grab as many students as possible. It's all driven about student success. And the outside of the student success is to make sure that they have a wage sustaining job. And specifically in public safety, and everybody on this call knows that we all had a lot of conversations is, what does that look like? How can we get those students through competently to make competent firefighters and law enforcement officers? So it's trying to get that thought process out of people's mind that colleges are just chasing students when, I can tell you at Versailles Tech, that's not it. We are trying to make sure that we have successful students.
All right. Chief Ben.
Real quick, marijuana is still illegal. People need to know that. Also, number two, we don't have quotas. So worrying about the end of the month or first of the month with law enforcement, that's not true. But on that same subject, it's really important for folks to understand this. We talk so much about violent crime that sometimes our community doesn't know that our pedestrian injuries and traffic injuries are rising. And since COVID, the United States is one of the few countries who still seem to tick up with pedestrian deaths, and that's because of speed. So I joke about the quota, but we have to slow down. And when folks are getting tickets, they're getting tickets in areas where we're having accidents and we're trying to prevent loss of life. So if everybody could just slow it down, that'd be great.
Super. I'm gonna start this with you, Chief Ben. How are you dealing with the current demographic drought in finding and retaining your workforce?
Okay, so earlier I mentioned some of the technology we were using to ease the burden of the already limited staff that we have. But where I was going with that is some of our strategies are civilianizing some of our positions. Over and over, we've seen officers get in bad situations because you see an officer with a gun and a badge dealing with something that they probably shouldn't even be dealing with. So we're looking at ways that we can give loud music calls, barking dog calls, maybe even traffic accidents where there's no egregious crime being committed and it was just an accident in a parking lot. If we can find a way where we can have civilian employees handle some of those calls, we can have officers out handling those violent crimes I've been talking about. Also, rebranding what a police officer is. So years ago, it was big, bulky, strong, big folks. No, we need critical thinkers. We need people who want to help the community. So we have to rebrand and make sure that folks know it's a place for you at the police department, particularly with the technology we have now. We need folks who just don't look like police officers on chips from years ago. Making sure we recognize our employees, because the first and most important step with getting our staff where we need to be is retaining what we have. So retention strategies, and I think Chief Mayo touched on this a little bit. We kind of gotten used to doing everything in-house as in the police department. So our recruiters, our police officers, we need to start looking at other ways to do that. As great as our folks are, as talented as they are, maybe we need some help. No, not maybe. We're going to need some help getting out of the situation we're in now.
Chief, I've got a question to ask you too, because y'all do some innovative stuff, but I'm from Winston-Salem and been here practically all my life, and I've noticed the last 20, 30 years that the police officers have facial hair. Could you talk about, the innovative approach that you guys working with recruiting in that sphere?
Good. That's great, because Chief Thompson in her last public safety news conference was talking about that very thing. So an officer who had been involved in a bad accident where he went to the stick center at Atrium, after getting out of the hospital, he approached the chief and said, "Hey, Chief, I would like to be able to do something for Atrium. They helped me and they helped others." So we had No Shave November. And so what we did was we just basically expanded that program. And so officers pay into wearing a beard, i.e. a beard, and that money goes to some of our nonprofits in the community that are helping out in the community. So when you see officers wearing that, they paid the money, and that money is going to a good cause. I want to tell you real quick on this one too, what we've done is reached out to colleges, and we started recruiting as if they're 5-star athletes. So we're going into the colleges and say, "Hey, who's interested in law enforcement?" Best students, we pick them up in a limo. They come here, they go to a college game, and then they have lunch with the chief and maybe breakfast with the mayor. So we're just trying to switch things up, and we're also getting their families involved in that because they're going to need that support in law enforcement.
Great, thanks, Chief. Chief Mayor.
I touched on a little bit of this stuff earlier, but the city manager and the city council and the city manager staff, they have worked diligently for several years to increase salaries, to give employees additional benefits. They've expanded residency limits. We've shortened hiring processes. We've been working to replace old fire stations and make them more accommodating to females and younger employees. One thing that I've not heard talked about very much out loud is how the public sector is now competing with the private sector for the same employees. Fire and police, I think Chief Penn will agree with me, fire and police have been working to hire a more diverse workforce for decades. We recognized years ago, at least as far back as the 90s, the value of having agencies that look like the public that they serve, and the customer service level increase that comes with having a diverse workforce. Well, now the private sector's figured that out. And it is relatively easy these days to make a high 5-figure or 6-figure salary in the private sector. And when a young person's out there trying to start a family, buy a house, pay current prices for food and energy, it's challenging for us to go dangle $40,000 in front of them and a 24-hour work schedule and lure them away from a 6-figure salary and a 37-hour work week. I mean, it is a real challenge.
Wow. Chantel, I know, putting your HR hat on, what have you dealt with or seen over the last couple of years related to the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I mean, really a lot of the same things that Trey and Assistant Chief Penn said, but, we're working closely with Greater Winston-Salem, Inc. and the community college and the high schools and other colleges and city, county. I mean, really trying to address the workforce shortage overall. So not only are we trying to address it just for ourselves because we have a deficit, we really are trying to figure out ways to address it for the community as a whole, because we know we're not the only ones suffering by that. So I do want to state that. Also, besides just trying to remain competitive in terms of pay, we also stress to our leadership, it's also the work environment, right? So anything and everything we can do to try to add fun and sometimes a not fun environment, we're trying to do it. I love Assistant Chief Ben when he said a limo, I added that down. Like maybe we need to start picking up people in a limo. I mean, we are so open to any ideas that will help us to recruit people and retain people. And we definitely do not have all of the answers. So I'll just leave with that.
All right. Jay, what do you have related to what you guys are doing in the paramedic field?
So really to help in the demographic drought, that helps all agencies, that we serve, is a few months ago, after several conversations with the leadership here and some others, knowing that our future workforce, are the ones coming out of your middle schools and high schools, and definitely even going back into middle schools as we start to prepare and get those kids interested in public safety, to get them really an understanding what that is, so they can kind of get into that program. Because, we want to ensure that, our workforce here is, that we're gaining enough folks over the years to do that. So we partner with multiple school systems, and every month we have about 50 kids that gets bused to our campus here, the public safety campus, and we do a complete tour of all fields. I mean, they get to see the BLET aspect. They get to go out and actually put gear on in the fire side and EMS, and we run them through a little bit of everything for a half a day. And that's for us, as we're trying to innovate. We're trying to help our community partners by getting that up. A lot different than, say, a high school career fair or some of the things that we're all used to doing and everybody's here used to doing. We're trying to get all these different school systems to come to our campus, and they are. We've actually had overwhelming response. So that way they can literally get their hands on and see each one of these. And then after those kids leave our campus, we reach back out through those school systems to see what was interested. And if you have some that are interested in one side or another, then we can kind of redirect them back to say, okay, here's the programs that Forsyth Tech has, here's how these other agencies, here's how they hire, what can we do? And that's kind of the approach that we've been taking to help, just to pull those folks up demographically across all the different counties to help our workforce.
Great. What is the biggest impact technology's had on the industry the last 5 years? And I think you touched on this a little bit, Chief Penn, but I'm gonna start with Chief Mayor.
I would say for us, thermal imaging and drone technology, they've made major improvements to what we do and what we are able to do. Thermal imaging has improved firefighters' ability to locate victims through smoke or to confirm the absence of victims. Also allows firefighters to see heat signatures and find fire that can't be seen in the visible spectrum. Drones have allowed us to aerially surveil situations that are either difficult to reach by ground, perhaps, or high risk for sending in humans for surveillance. And during the Weaver fire, although we don't have any drones in the Winston-Salem Fire Department, we were using 8 assisting agencies, including Winston-Salem Police Department. We launched the largest, and I realize drone technology is relatively new, but thus far, for as long as that technology has been around, we launched the largest drone deployment in the history of North Carolina during the week of that fire. So that technology has really come a long way in short order.
Right. Jay, what technologies have you seen in the paramedic field that you care to share?
So one of the things that we're really working on right now that helps all of our community partners when it comes to educating their workforce, whether they're new getting into the field or they're that continuing education piece, is we've added in what's called a high flex model. So traditionally, you think about education, you have online, you get online, you have a face-to-face class, and from our workforce, everybody here, because of those schedules, you can't always be on a face-to-face. I mean, that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And then of course, some do not do well in just a strictly online format. So we are moving to a lot of our classes to high flex, and that's a technology base. That is something very, very new. The college has just started, and we've started shifting a lot of our programs to that. And what that looks like is, so you have a teacher in class teaching a class. So a student has 3 ways they can learn. They can come to that class, they can be at home and they can log in and ask questions and interact with the teacher live. And they can look at that recording later and do their education piece after the fact, kind of like you would in an online class. So that allows a student to kind of be online, but if they need that little bit of extra technology, and that is something that we had to upfit. That was a great thing that our leadership of the college did, is start implementing specialized classrooms. So that is a huge technology piece that will really help our workforce and our students tremendously. And then the second is virtual reality. In the public safety area right now, we are experimenting with VR. There are agencies out there. Chief Penn probably knows there's a lot of law enforcement agencies that have moved and are working with virtual reality so they can do specialized training. That's not necessarily very easy to do on a day-to-day basis just because of shift schedules and different things and the cost. So we are currently talking to and looking at a couple of different agencies outside of North Carolina that use VR technology for public safety to see what that looks like. So that could be a game changer, but we're still looking a little bit off in the future.
Yeah. Chantel.
I'd say the largest thing for us in county government really has been platforms like Zoom, like Teams, like Google. Prior to COVID, we really never used it. And so now I don't know life without it. And so that's been a game changer for us. It's also helped with some of our back house operations with teleworking, staying connected, even being able to answer, the phones through your computer. So I'd have to say just platforms like this really has been a game changer for the way we do business in county government.
Great. Chief Penn, I think we've already asked you, or can you touch on some of the technologies that you face?
I'm gonna be brief on this one. This thing right here, it's almost at the heart of every bit of the crime that we're facing. So with that, we need tools to be able to combat that. Thanks to the city, thanks to grants we received, and thanks to our Winston-Salem Police Foundation, we've been able to get some of those tools because, trust me, they aren't cheap, but they're vital for us in the battle to fight some of this crime, particularly violent crime. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question before we go to Q&A. And what is your biggest increase in citizen engagement in your area? How are the citizens, are you reaching out to them and them reaching back to you? Chantel?
So we did a citizen survey, and it was very clear through that survey that they wanted to hear more and learn more about county government. So we actually hired our first communications director just a few months ago. We've never had that. It always has been very decentralized. And so now we have an actual communications department whose sole focus is to make sure we're pushing out information to the public. So that's the game changer for us. Even on the recruitment side, that's going to be a game changer for us. I'd say even, through COVID, it's really pushed our teams to be more out in the community, especially on the public health side. And then now with even all of our other departments, we're in the community, serving them, meeting them where they are, providing the resources that they need. We even a few months ago had our second annual community outreach event. And the purpose of that is really for the general public to, one, get to know us, but then also to receive services on the spot. So every single forward-facing department was out, serving the public. It was also fun. We had games and food trucks and those types of things. Again, really just trying to engage and connect. And then finally, what I will say is we have tons of volunteer boards that we would love to have more participation. It is for the residents. We have lots of vacancies. They can go on forsyth.cc. We need more volunteers to assist on these boards. So that's my plug for if you want to be more engaged with county government. We have tons of opportunities, committees for individuals to participate on, and folks can go on our website forsyth.cc to learn more about that and apply.
Chief Mayor.
We were fortunate about a year and a half ago to inherit Tabitha Childress from the Community Assistance Liaison's Office, which is another department in the city that assists city council members. And she has been an absolute godsend to us for improving the fire department's connections in the community and scheduling our crews to be out and about at various functions going on around town. So that's been a big part of our citizen engagement activities. Social media has been a useful tool. We've used our marketing department, the city's marketing department, to create marketing videos to help tell some of the great stories going on in the fire department, and we push those out via social media. A lot of departments across this country, this one included, have long been of a mindset that, you know, our duty was to stay at the fire station with the door shut and not come out until there was a request for service. And, you know, the fact is that just does not meet the expectations of the community today. And it has taken and is still taking some effort to change that direction and the culture of this organization and others across America's fire service.
Great. Jay?
Well, I'd say for SciTech, I mean, holistically, we're definitely about putting the community in community college. So there's a lot of things that we've been doing. There are fairs for SciTech is very ingrained into a lot of programs. I'm sure everybody here has seen a lot of things that's been in the media. As Chief Mayo says, we are heavy in social media, even with just specifically in the public safety area, we do a lot of social media contacts with citizens. We have summer camps that we are trying to engage our citizens with, along with a lot of the other programs that I talked about earlier. We also, throughout the college and including the public safety campus here, just recently opened a food pantry. And that food pantry is, you know, for students and citizens and those folks in this, you know, particular area here, you know, trying to have a little bit more engagement with the community members to let them know that, you know, the college itself is obviously an educational facility, but at the same time, we want to ensure that all of our citizens are served very well. So there's a multitude of things. And I will definitely say, you know, you've probably seen, you know, Blaze, our new mascot for SciTech, is in a lot of places, and that's intentional. So you'll see Blaze, the mascot, and she gets out to a lot of other agencies, to fairs and those kind of pieces to ensure that we have that connection with the community so they know kind of what SciTech is.
Right. Chief Penn.
Yeah, so we also have a PIO, and she's doing a great job of telling our story and getting that out there. You might be familiar with the Citizens Police Academy we had. You might be familiar. I think so. We also have, yes, we also have one for the youth. We jump out there and engage with our colleges, our HBCUs. We do that for recruiting as well as just letting them know what's going on. We're here, and anything we can do to help. Our Winston-Salem Police Foundation came up with a T-ball league last year on the east side of Winston-Salem. It was a beautiful facility that had not been used in 30 years. So last year we had our first T-ball league there. We're gonna come back this year, do it bigger and better. And we're also on social media, but we're always looking for any other opportunity to engage the community. This webinar, what we're doing today helps. We've been doing webinars for anything we try to roll out to the community and get their take on it as well.
All right. There are three things that the city does. City of Winston-Salem University, in which all citizens can apply and go through and learn about all the departments within the city. There's a City of Winston-Salem Fire Department, Citizen Academy that you can participate in, that is in Chief Mayo's wheelhouse. And then also we have the City of Winston-Salem Citizens Police Academy, which talks about the various departments within the City of Winston-Salem Police. I know we're running short of time. I'm going to turn it over to Catherine, say a few words, and I appreciate our panelists for being part of this great conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. So I would like to give a special thank you to Jeff Smith and Jennifer Coulomb for planning and executing this month's Leaders in Lunch, or Leaders in Lunch. So we do this every month, with the exception of January. We would like to encourage you all to keep your eyes peeled on our schedule for our community conversation, which is scheduled currently for June the 12th. It's a conversation around mental health with details to come. And a special thank you to our guests for our panel, Chantel, Will, Trey, and Jay, all of whom, in the event that you didn't know, are Leadership Winston-Salem alums from the best class ever. So thank you to each of you. Happy holidays to everybody who joined joined us today. Thank you for your support of Leadership Winston-Salem.